Welcome to This Week in Resistance, a weekly summary of events in West Asia, detailing reaction and resistance from a left perspective, for the week of Saturday, September 6th to Friday, September 12th. Beginning with Gaza. In the past week, the illegal settler-colonial occupation called Israel's genocidal war on the people of Gaza has claimed 435 martyrs and injured 1,897, bringing the total since October 7, 2023 to 64,803 martyrs and 164,264 injuries, as per the health ministry in Gaza's incredibly rigorous identification practices. On September 7th and 8th, the negotiating team of the Islamic Resistance Movement, or Hamas, noted that following their approval of a proposal on August 18th regarding negotiations to end the genocide, they finally began receiving some positive moves from American negotiators, while the occupation remained silent. Then, on the 9th, 10 IOF warplanes dropped 10 bombs on the residential complex the Hamas negotiating delegation was at in Doha, Qatar. Although the occupation's aggression failed in killing the leading figures of the delegation, the attack still slew Jihad Labad, director of the office of Dr. Khalil al-Hayya, one of the leaders of the Hamas Politburo and head of the negotiating delegation, Hammam al-Hayya, Khalil al-Hayya's son, 3 aides, Abdullah Abdul Wahid, Mumin Hasuna, and Ahmed al-Mamluk, as well as a warrant officer of the Qatari Internal Security. It is clear that, like their aggression on Iran a few months prior, the genocidal collaborators of America and Israel used the pretext of America opening up to diplomacy to deceive the Hamas delegation into a position where it was easy for the IOF to assassinate them. Occupation officials have confirmed that US authorities approved the strike before it happened, and one Israeli journalist said of this that, quote, "They offered them a deal to return. They gathered in one place, and the rest became history," end quote. Trump has come out claiming he was against the strike, yet believes it could be an opportunity for peace, further confirming the fact beyond his empty words that Israel is simply America's imperialist attack dog outpost in West Asia. Despite the Qatari Foreign Ministry's condemnations of the blatant violation of their sovereignty and their vows of retaliation, the state bears great responsibility in the ongoing genocide through their inaction, normalization with the illegal occupation, and their deep complicity in the genocidal capitalist imperialist world system, led by America, which they act as little more than a satellite of. They proceeded to suspend their mediation between Hamas and the occupation. Despite 700 days of genocide, the residents of Gaza City rallied on the 8th to defy the occupation's orders to evacuate, holding signs with slogans like, "Steadfast in Gaza until the soul departs," "We will not be displaced," "Stop our genocide," "We will not leave," and "The only departure from Gaza is towards the sky," reaffirming the Palestinian people's legendary steadfastness in the face of this latest stage in the occupation's plans to utterly erase them. Now to actions reported by the resistance in Gaza over the past week. On Saturday, August 6th, the armed wing of Hamas, the Martyr Izz-ad-Din al-Qassam Brigades, or Al-Qassam Brigades, reported that on August 31st, their fighters targeted 3 Merkava tanks south of Az-Zaytun and trapped and detonated a number of IOF vehicles in a pre-prepared minefield east of Az-Zaytun. As for the 6th, they reported shelling a gathering of IOF soldiers and vehicles north of Khan Yunis. On Sunday, August 7th, the armed wing of Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Saraya al-Quds, struck the militarized Gaza envelope settlement of Netivot with 2 rockets. On Monday, September 8th, Al-Qassam Brigades raided a fortified IOF position in the center of Jabalia around 5 a.m., an action in which one fighter climbed into a Merkava tank, throwing a Bark guerrilla action explosive device in the cockpit. Occupation media reported that fighters then opened fire on the tank and its commander, and it caught fire, resulting in the death of the entire crew, at least 4 soldiers. Occupation media also reported another of what they call a serious security incident in the Gaza Strip. The armed wing of the Palestinian Mujahideen movement, the Mujahideen Brigades, reported that on the 5th, their fighters shot down an IOF drone carrying out reconnaissance missions over Rafah in coordination with Al-Qassam Brigades. The armed wing of the Popular Resistance Committees, Al-Nasr Salahuddin Brigades, alongside the Fatah-aligned Al-Amudi Brigade of Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades, shelled a gathering of IOF soldiers and vehicles in Kafr al-Qarara with 60 caliber mortars. And Sarai al-Quds reported that on the 29th of August, they thwarted an infiltration attempt by IOF special forces in southern Gaza, inflicting casualties and seizing military equipment. On Tuesday, September 9th, Al-Qassam Brigade shelled a gathering of IOF soldiers and vehicles in the Morag axis with a number of heavy caliber mortars. And Sarai al-Quds reported shelling IOF forces east of Shuja'iyah with 60 caliber mortars. Finally, on Thursday, September 11th, the Mujahideen brigades announced shelling an IOF position east of Khan Yunis alongside Al-Aqsa Martyrs brigades using 107 type rockets. Moving to the West Bank in 1948 occupied Palestine, where a lot happened over the past week. In the early hours of September 6th, the IOF invaded the town of Beit Awa, south of Al-Khalil, or Hebron, and detained dozens of Palestinians at Qasr Ghaith in the town of Anata, conducting field interrogations in a massive detention campaign across the town, in which they also stormed and ransacked residents' homes. Settlers grazed their sheep on Palestinian land in the village of Shalalat al-Auja, north of Ariha, or Jericho. The IOF detained 2 Palestinians at the Awarta checkpoint northeast of the city of Nablus, stormed the town of Sebastia, northwest of Nablus, halting municipal work and detaining contractors, invaded the Qolandia refugee camp north of Al-Quds, or Jerusalem, as well as the town of Aqraba, south of Nablus, the town of Qabatia, south of Jenin, and occupation police violently cracked down on a Gaza solidarity protest held in al-Fahm, 1948 occupied Palestine. Young settlers assaulted a Palestinian Bedouin community east of the village of At-Taibeh, east of Ramallah, attempting to destroy their property. The IOF opened fire near the entrance of the village of Al-Manshia, south of Beit Lahem, or Bethlehem, and abducted a Palestinian youth after raiding his home in Al-Khalil. On the morning of September 7th, the IOF again abducted a Palestinian at the Awarta checkpoint. Settlers under IOF protection broke into the third holiest site in Islam outside of Mecca and Medina, Al-Aqsa Mosque, and occupied Al-Quds, continuing constant provocations in the area, as they believe that the destruction of the mosque and its replacement with a new Jewish temple will bring about the end times. Armed settler militia under IOF cover broke into the village of Sinjil, southeast of Salfit, harassing the indigenous residents and indiscriminately firing. Video shows a Palestinian vehicle that was fired upon. This unfortunately common occurrence is demonstrative of a common settler-colonial tactic. The informal settler formations operate as the vanguard of the formal military, maintaining the illusion of a distinction between the two, when in reality, they are simply 2 blades of the same spear. True to form, the IOF shot and assaulted a Palestinian before detaining him east of Al-Bideh. And occupation police again repressed Palestinian protesters in al-Fahm. Finally that day, an IOF Special Forces unit detained a Palestinian from his car in Qalqilia. In the early hours of the 8th, colonial government forces forced Palestinian shop owners in Beit Daz vegetable market to evacuate, so they could demolish half of the shops there, 16 in total. Videos later depict the widespread destruction, which reportedly happened without any prior notice. The IOF built earth mounds to block the entrance to the village of Al-Jadida in the northern West Bank, and an IOF soldier yelled at and threatened to shoot a Palestinian woman in the town who was simply trying to recover gold stolen from her home by them. 2 resistance fighters boarded a bus at the junction of the illegal settlement of Ramot, built on the lands of the villages of Nabi Samwil, Beit Iqsa, and Shafat, and occupied Al-Quds. Reportedly disguised as security, the fighters opened fire with a Palestinian-made SMG on the bus and in the heavily congested junction, killing 7 and injuring at least 20, with 5 in critical condition. The operation was later claimed by al-Qassam brigades and was carried out by Mutana Naji Omar from Al-Qubayba and Mohammad Bassam Taha from Qatana, both villages segregated from Al-Quds by an apartheid wall. They both fought until they were killed. Al-Qassam had this to say to the occupation, quote, "The qualitative operation that surprised you in time and place is a clear message that all your failed attempts to dry up the sources of resistance will only result in the shedding of the blood of your Nazi army's soldiers and your criminal settlers from where you least expect it and more than you imagine," end quote. As well as the fact that, quote, "These desperate attempts will only be a fuse for widespread explosion in its ugly face, and that its continuation of the war of genocide and aggression against holy sites, land, and people will be met with the steadfastness of the resilient people and the valiant resistance," end quote. Actions like these are presented by the occupation as evidence of the supposed barbarism of Palestinians, depicted as random acts of violence. In reality, while it is of course regrettable, it is nevertheless inevitable. Colonialism breeds violence, and to adapt a quote from famous Irish revolutionary Padraig Pearse, "Palestine unfree shall never be at peace." The occupation itself encourages these operations, not only with its physical presence, not only with its endlessly escalating violence and colonization, but with its targeting of the most advanced sections of the Palestinian resistance, constricting and crushing them until the only paths for resistance can express themselves in ways as brutal as the occupation daily does unto them. It must be said too that settlers are active participants in the violent colonization of a land that is not theirs, and that they bear the responsibility of acknowledging said participation. By their complicity and aid in a genocidal settler-colonial project, they make themselves targets. The burden of grace is not on the colonized, not on the indigenous Palestinians. It is on the settlers to recognize that they have put themselves and their own families in danger by participating in the genocide of another people's land, and to leave, as many easily can, or stay only in order to fight for the liberation of Palestine in its entirety, as a free and whole Palestine is the only state in which all those who inhabit the land may live in peace. Continuing on the 8th, the IOF assaulted an elderly Palestinian man in Khirbet al-Raqiz in Masafir Yatta. A large group of settlers were seen moving near the village of Yatma, south of Nablus, where they lit Palestinian olive groves on fire. Residents of Jenin camp broke the occupation's siege on the area, attempting to inspect their homes and document the destruction after more than 230 days of sustained aggression and demolitions. A number of them were detained, some remained besieged in the camp for hours, and the IOF murdered two 14-year-old Palestinian children, Islam Abdulaziz Majarmeh and Mohammad Sari Omar Alaoudneh. Settlers threw rocks at Palestinian vehicles in southern Nablus. Settlers burned down a plant nursery west of Deir Sharaf, northwest of Nablus, injuring 3 Palestinians. And the Jenin Brigade of Sarai al-Quds reported that their fighters in the Qabatia unit detonated a guided sigil explosive device on invading IOF vehicles in the city's western neighborhood, stating that their fighters, quote, "continue to confront the enemy forces invading the town according to the requirements and conditions of the field," end quote. Sarai al-Quds West Bank section released a propaganda video announcing that their fight continues. On September 9th, Palestinians attempting to return to their homes after IOF street closures on Palestinian land near Ramallah were fired upon by the IOF with stun grenades and tear gas, who then blocked ambulances from entering, forcing medics to carry the injured on foot. The IOF blew up the home of Palestinian detainee Thabet Masalmeh's family in Beit Dawa in order to collectively punish them for his alleged killing of a settler. The only road to northwest al-Quds Governorate was blocked in another scene of collective punishment for the Ramot operation, and the IOF blocked an ambulance from passing. Settlers again stormed Al-Aqsa Mosque. The occupation demolished the home of a family of murdered Palestinian Abdul Rauf al-Masri in Al-Qaba, east of Tubas. The IOF again invaded Qabatia, where they shot and injured several Palestinians. and invaded al-Fawar camp south of al-Khalil. Early on the 10th, the IOF invaded Tuba city to carry out demolitions there. Settlers assaulted a Palestinian with Down syndrome named Saleh in front of his home while attacking the village of Yabrud, northeast of Ramallah.
وبضربوا على راسه بيسووا له حفره في راسه وبيسووا له ضربات في وجهه وفي ركبته. اجوا هجموا عليك المستوطنين. شو ضربوك؟ ضربوك عصاه. وين ضربوك العصا؟ وين ضربوك اياها؟ هذا وين اخري؟ ووجهك هان اخري؟ وجهك هان اخري وهان؟ شو سووا لك اخوه راحوا؟ وين راحوا؟ على المستوطنه؟
Quds News Network reported that in August alone, the IOF destroyed nearly 12,000 Palestinian agricultural trees, mostly olives, some of which are centuries old. The IOF detonated the home of Abdullah and Abdurrahman Dhafir in the town of Kafr Abush, west of Nablus, because they allegedly killed a settler last year. The IOF abused detainees while invading Al-Mara neighborhood of Jenin, and bulldozed dozens of olive trees on Palestinian land near Al-Yamun, northwest of Jenin. The head of Araka Village Council reported that this was a campaign in which they raised over 200 dunams of land, which is nearly 50 acres, in Al-Yamun and Araka. A settler harassed a Palestinian Bedouin community near Ad-Dahiriya, southwest of Al-Khalil. Undercover occupation soldiers abducted a Palestinian from his vehicle in Aram, north of Al-Quds. The IOF built earth walls in the village of Beit Anan, northwest of Al-Quds. And later detained a Palestinian child and his father in southern Nablus. On September 11th, settlers lit 2 trucks on fire in the town of Al-Minya, southeast of Beit Lahem. And a similar incident occurred in the village of Atara, north of Ramallah, where settlers attempted to light a vehicle on fire and left inciting graffiti on a Palestinian home. The IOF carried out a massive campaign of abductions, detaining dozens of Palestinians in the town of Bidu, northwest of Al-Quds, and subjecting them to inhumane treatment. Occupation forces set up caravans on Palestinian land near the town of Arihiya, south of Al-Khalil, establishing a new colonial outpost, and put up a notification threatening to demolish a school also south of Al-Khalil. The Tulqarim Brigade of Sarai al-Quds claimed an IED attack against the IOF. At 1:20 p.m., they managed to detonate a pre-prepared Shuja-1 explosive on a Namr military vehicle, putting it out of service near the Nitsani Oz checkpoint, and Medivac helicopters were spotted as at least 2 soldiers were reported wounded by occupation media. The operation was conducted in coordination with fighters from Al-Qassam brigades in Tulqarim, and in response, the occupation laid siege to the city, closing all entrances and streets, and proceeding to arrest over 1,500 residents, including some children, across the city and throughout the day, parading them in the streets. Reports say they detained almost every Palestinian man they saw, in the streets, on buses, in buildings like pharmacies and shops, raided homes, ransacking them and assaulting residents indiscriminately. A video shows how buildings and vehicles were left open and empty afterwards. Those abducted were brought to a library the IOF seized and turned into a detention camp, and Quds News Network says they were not interrogated, just, quote, subjected to abuse, insults, and humiliation, before some were later released, end quote. Netanyahu officially signed Fascist Minister Bezalel Smotrich's E1 plan, which will seize about 200 square kilometers of Palestinian land east of Al-Quds, a move that would essentially cut the West Bank in half, as a part of the colonial occupation's plans to annex the West Bank in its entirety and completely erase Palestine. Netanyahu stated regarding this that, quote, "We have previously pledged that there will be no Palestinian state, and indeed, no Palestinian state will be established," end quote. On September 12th, The IOF, continuing their collective punishment against Tulkarm, abducted journalist al-Jolani after assaulting him and his wife in their home. Settlers shot and injured 4 Palestinians in the town of Deir Jarir, east of Ramallah. The IOF invaded Nablus, and then the resistance in the old city of Nablus targeted them with a locally made explosive. Settlers again grazed their sheep on Palestinian land in Shalalat al-Auja. The IOF razed Palestinian-owned greenhouses in Tulkarm, and razed Palestinian land near the village of al-Luban al-Sharqiyya, east of Salfit, also reportedly closing the side roads of the town. A stabbing operation occurred in the Tsufah settlement west of Al-Quds, in which one settler was seriously wounded and another moderately. Hamas noted that, quote, "The option of confrontation with the occupier is the natural response to its crimes and brutal massacres in the Gaza Strip, the attacks by fascist settlers in the cities and villages of the West Bank and Al-Quds, and its desperate attempts to impose annexation and displacement," end quote. The IOF invaded the town of Beitin, east of Ramallah. The Tubas Brigade of Sarai al-Quds reported that fighters of their Al-Farah camp unit trapped IOF vehicles in an ambush at the entrance to the camp, managing to detonate a number of pre-prepared explosive devices and achieving confirmed hits. The IOF then abducted and assaulted residents of the camp. Then, the IOF opened fire in Shuafat camp in Al-Quds, injuring at least 3 people, and ransacking the home of Mohammad Mahmoud al-Shawamra, who was accused of perpetrating the Tsufah stabbing operation. Journalists covering the IOF's repression of the areas around Al-Quds following resistance operations filmed occupation soldiers throwing stun grenades at them, quote, "as if they were mocking the journalists or playing a game," end quote. The IOF also abducted 3 Palestinians from Azun, east of Qalqilia, including Yassini Majd Beita, who was only released from occupation prisons after 2 years the day before. Finally, an IOF vehicle intentionally rammed a civilian car during an invasion of the town of Al-Fandumia, south of Jenin. In news from Syria, on September 7th, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, or SOHR, raised the number of dead in the clashes in Suwaida to 2,026, adding that the toll is expected to continue rising as searches for missing people are ongoing, in addition to new ceasefire violations in the Suwaida countryside. In July, the Druze minority in Suwaida, southeast Syria, came under attack by the new Syrian central government, led by former ISIS commander Mohammad al-Jolani, who is also the leader of the former al-Qaeda affiliate Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS, a far-right coalition of militias backed by NATO. The HTS government has a history of sectarian violence, and the SOHR also reported on the 7th that they have extrajudicially executed over 3,000 people in the 9 months since taking power, mostly from the Druze and Alawite minorities. The illegal settler-colonial occupation of Israel has attempted to co-opt the cause of the Druze, to use their real suffering to expand their areas of control in Syria, which already extend beyond the occupied Golan Heights and are uncomfortably close to the capital of Dimashq, or Damascus. The SOHR says that over 10,000 people have been killed in total in the intense instability that has followed the fall of Bashar al-Assad's government, instability that is being deepened and encouraged not just by Jolani's regime as a vehicle for control over the country's populace, but also by the Israeli occupation, which both backs Jolani and seeks greater control over the country, and ultimately by the wider imperialist bloc that hopes to keep Syria's people down and their resources ripe for exploitation. The IOF on the 7th made an incursion on the road between Jabba and Batna in the Quneitra countryside, inspecting vehicles. And then, late on the 8th, the IOF carried out heavy strikes in the Homs area, supposedly targeting weapons depots. They then continued, striking near the city of Latakia multiple times, possibly targeting the Sakubin barracks in the area, killing at least 4, and striking the Palmyra area amidst reports of IOF jets over the Syrian coast, drones in the Daraa area, and possibly even more strikes on Dimashq. As previously stated, make no mistake, The occupation supports Jolani's government and are currently in the midst of negotiating security deals with them. This is why the HTS regime offered only a tepid condemnation of the strikes, with no statement from Jolani himself as of now. But they support him only insofar as it is beneficial to their interests, which are the colonization and subjugation of as great an area as they can get away with. When viewed in this light, seemingly contradictory actions are actually unified. Jolani is useful to repress the Syrian resistance and to open up the country to being looted by foreign companies, but also useful to the occupation in the instability he has taken advantage of and exacerbated. The IOF hopes to defang Syria to the best of its capabilities and, once again, expand their real areas of control. So it seems they are taking advantage of the weakness of Jolani's regime and its subservience to its imperial backers in order to destroy any capabilities it, or the Syrian people, have of possibly fighting back, to cow them into submission. An IOF source told North Press Agency that the strikes in Homs targeted Turkish weapons recently transferred into Syria, and stressed that the occupation seeks to disarm southern Syria, quote, a region it considers vital to its national security, end quote. That is, to prep it for annexation. Late on September 10th and into the 11th, clashes broke out between the HTS regime and the Syrian Democratic Forces, or SDF, along the Euphrates south of Tishrin Dam in eastern Halab, or Aleppo, which Turkey bombed just 2 weeks ago, targeting SDF positions. Although both sides claim the other initiated, it seems HTS regime fighters first launched Grad rockets towards SDF positions, and the SDF responded, shelling HTS positions with heavy rocket-assisted mortars. Later, the HTS regime dropped an IED on an SDF vehicle. The fighting seems to have died down after that, following a similar pattern to many recent clashes between the two sides, as America, Israel, and Turkey are pressing for the SDF to submit to the government, now led by the very kind of extremists they fought for nearly a decade. On the 12th, Mohammad al-Jolani graciously received the head prosecutor of genocidal American imperialism in West Asia, CENTCOM Commander Charles Bradley Cooper, deepening the ties between the two terrorist organizations. In news from Lebanon, on September 6th, the IOF dropped an incendiary bomb on the town of Taibeh and then struck a truck in Ma'aliyah and TWIR Governorate. Joining the thousands of ceasefire violations the IOF has committed since November 2024, largely in southern Lebanon, where all locations to be mentioned are, unless indicated otherwise. On September 7th, Azam al-Ayyubi, former Secretary General of the Lebanese chapter of the Muslim Brotherhood, a Sunni Islamist organization, condemned the ongoing US-backed plan to disarm the Lebanese resistance, pushed unconstitutionally by the government, demonstrating that the rejection of this move goes beyond sectarian lines and is the true will of the Lebanese people. He stated that, quote, Lebanon's leaders, especially the government, should hold a dialogue on a national defense strategy instead of talking about disarming the resistance under weak excuses. The enemy, backed by the US, wants Lebanon and its army to remain weak. We all heard Israeli leaders demand the army destroy any weapons found in the south, end quote. Going on to say that, quote, Israel does not respect any state. Its repeated strikes on Syria prove it fears not concessions, but the men who resist, end quote. And that, quote, Lebanese of all sects must unite in a serious dialogue to form a joint force that can defend the country against Israel, end quote. See episodes 4 and 8 of this show for more context on the situation. On September 8th, a civilian named Hassan al-Hajj was injured by an IOF drone while grazing his livestock in western Mays al-Jabal. An IOF drone strike targeted a car in Jiyeh, injuring one. The IOF launched multiple airstrikes on the outskirts of Hermel and the Beqa, killing 5 and wounding 5 others. The 5 killed were members of Hezbollah Haidar Mustafa Asaf, Ali Khodor Hamadeh, Ayham Tariq Zaiter, Samir Ahmad Medlej, and Hassan Abdul Qarim As-Siblani. An IOF drone strike targeted a vehicle in Barja, north of the Litani River, the ceasefire line, in Shuf district. On the morning of the 9th, the IOF reportedly carried out a detonation in Aitarun. They fired incendiary munitions between Ramesh and Yarun. At dawn on the 11th, an IOF unit invaded Aita Shab, detonating a building at a special needs school. The IOF continued their aggression throughout the day, hitting a motorcycle in the town of Kafr Dunin, injuring 5 people including 2 Lebanese army soldiers who were passing by, carrying out an explosion outside Ramya, killing Hezbollah commander Wasim Jabaye on his motorcycle in Aitit, striking an excavator in Aitarun, and also striking Ansar 4 times, hitting Wadi Azararia, Galat Mace, Kusaya and the Beqa, and Ashara. IOF spokesman Avishai Adrai also brazenly entered occupied Khiyam. On September 12th, the IOF demolished a home on the outskirts of Mace al-Jabal, and an IOF airstrike hit Aita al-Jabal. As per Al-Akhbar, an IOF drone dropped a sound bomb near an agricultural project in the Wazani plain, coinciding with a sweep using machine guns. An IOF drone targeted a prefabricated room in Nakura. Another drone targeted multiple civilians in Daira, who luckily survived. A drone strike injured a civilian as they struck near his home outside Aita Shab. Another strike in Aita al-Jabal hit a vehicle. And finally, another strike targeted Aitarun. Finally, news from Yemen. On September 7th, the Yemeni Armed Forces, or YAF, launched a large operation involving multiple drones, in which 3 targeted 2 military sites in the occupied Naqab, 1 targeted a vital target in Ascalon, 1 targeted Lod or Ben Gurion Airport, 2 targeted a site in the Asdud area, and most importantly, video has surfaced of the final strike, in which a drone managed to target Ramon Airport in the occupied area of Eilat. Senior Ansarallah leader Nasr ad-Din Amr called the strike on Ramon a, quote, qualitative and different military operation, end quote, and reportedly, 8 were injured. The YAF claims, with increasing validity, that, quote, Israeli and American interception systems failed to detect and intercept a number of the drones, end quote. Something confirmed by the occupation in the case of Ramon Airport, where they say early warning systems did not detect the drone at all, indicating the increasing capabilities of the YAF, some of which stem from locally made and developed missiles and drones. On September 8th, the YAF carried out drone operations for the 2nd day in a row, using 3 drones to target Lod Airport, Ramon Airport again, where interception seems to have failed and the drone landed in an open area near the airport, and a, quote, sensitive target in Dimona, end quote, possibly the nuclear site there. On the 9th, the YAF reported their 3rd day in a row of operations, using a multi-warhead Fission Palestine II hypersonic ballistic missile to hit several targets around Al-Quds. They also sent 3 drones towards Ramon Airport and 2 targets in occupied Rashrash. September 10th saw a massive wave of IOF strikes on Yemen for about the 3rd time in as many weeks. Brigadier General Yahya Sari stated that local air defenses confronted the attack, forcing some combat formations to leave, but still the IOF dropped more than 30 bombs, reportedly targeting the September 26th newspaper headquarters, Yemen's military newspaper, named after the Republican movement that deposed the country's king in the 60s, another newspaper, Al-Yemen, a medical station, and the headquarters of the religious police, all in the capital Sana'a, as well as the central bank branch building in nearby Al-Jawf Governorate. The toll as of now is 46 killed and 165 injured, including multiple children, and is likely to rise as more people are recovered. The IOF, of course, claims they targeted what they call Houthi military camps, but it is clear that they once again targeted predominantly civilian areas in an attempt to terrorize the population for their steadfast support of Palestine. On the 11th, The IOF reported launching a Palestine 2 missile and a drone at 2 IOF sites in the occupied Naqab, as well as 2 drones at Ramon Airport. Finally, in a speech, leader of the Ansarallah movement, Abdul Malik al-Houthi, highlighted how, quote, Israeli aggression will not break the will of the Yemeni people. It will only strengthen their determination and resilience, end quote. And that, quote, the sacrifices made by Yemen are far less than the losses it would suffer if it had chosen a different course, end quote. Truly, as horrible as it is to see so many civilians mindlessly slaughtered, if it were not for movements that, at the very least, seek to preserve national sovereignty, that fight against imperialism, the destruction and suffering wrought on their nations would be unspeakably worse. Even in the case of Gaza, where we are witnessing a Holocaust, if the resistance there did not exist and did not continue to fight, Gaza would have been removed from the face of this planet years, even decades earlier. Don't let the oppressors reframe the situation as they always seek to do. The resistance blooms from the masses of people, in response to the violence of their oppressors. And resistance is always justified and legitimate in the face of such oppression, even when it goes on the offensive, perhaps even more so. To that point, and to finish for this week, the masses of Sadda came out on Friday for the weekly demonstration in the support of the Palestinian people and their resistance, and made a show of their conviction in the Ansarallah movement's actions to end the genocide, especially in the face of the brutal IOF aggressions on the nation in past weeks. This show is simply a compilation and summary of the hard work of Al-Akhbar, Quds News Network, Resistance News Network, The Cradle, Mint Press News, North Press Agency, and War and War on Telegram. Their consistent reporting and analysis are the only reason this show is possible. Thank you for watching.